The things that you desire, the things that speak to your soul, the only reason you want to do something and that something speaks to you is that you can actually do it, and you can do it in this lifetime, and you were meant to go in that direction. And so I think we waste so much energy, and I've certainly done this in my life, doubting, well, can I do it? Am I good enough? Blah, blah, blah. And I think if we can just decide your desire is a green light, whatever is speaking to you, you need to go in that direction and trust in the direction you're pulled. It's going to lead to something good for you, for other people as well. When we just decide that we are also worthy of what we desire, you wouldn't have a desire that you weren't worthy of achieving. We can stop wasting that energy that's tied to doubting and instead put it into something productive, which is actually taking action towards the direction of our dreams.
So today I have a woman who is a superhuman, who is the founder of Superhuman Selling, and she sells movements. And she is all about doing sales in a way that is authentic, that brings out your unique talents and ability so that you feel comfortable selling. It's not sleazy. It's not slimy. It is just you embracing your gifts and sharing it with the world and making a couple of bucks along the way. Who doesn't want that? So welcome to our guest today, Elyse Archer. Elyse, thank you so much for being on today's podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be so much fun. And I'm just excited to see where our conversation goes. So I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah.
Great. I am so excited. I mean, look, Elyse has done so much. She was like a co-founder or a partner in like an 8-figure coaching company, right? I said that right. 8 figures. Like, I can't even get my arms around that number. So the wisdom that you're going to share, I'm like taking notes. So Elyse, tell us what most, if not all people don't know about you that has contributed to your success. And that could be personal or professional, but something that they can't just get by Googling you or ChatGPTing your name.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. That's a great question. I have an incredible drive to move forward in my life. And I think that's contributed to a lot of the success and the obstacles and failures I've bumped into along the way. Because I think any of us who are really driven and motivated, we learn as we go. It's like a learning on the job process. But yeah, when I was born, my parents tell me this to this day. They looked at me and they were like, she has a very persistent chin. And I don't know where they got that from, but you know what?
What did that mean? Did you ask them? You said chin, CHIN.
Yeah, chin. Which
well, you do have a prominent chin. Like, I guess we're not that different chin-wise.
Right. Things you would never...
Did you ever ask them what that meant?
I didn't ask. Well, I think it played out in my life and it actually contributed to sales, because I think that's one of the things that we have to get really good at in sales and as entrepreneurs is being persistent in spite of obstacles. So I didn't ask what that meant per se. It was someone's perception of me, but it's just interesting how those things that sometimes people can pick up on about us so early on in life do end up becoming something that really plays out in our life later and become very true for us. So yeah, I'm driven, I'm persistent.
And that's all because of your chin.
We're gonna blame it on the chin. Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's interesting what you just said, because we know that the brain believes whatever it's told, whatever we say to ourselves, right? Yeah. So if we're told from a young age that you're persistent, you're driven, you will be prominent in your field, that will in fact come to fruition because of the neuroscience and the neurons that connect. By the same token, if we tell ourselves or believe when people tell us that we're stupid, that we're dumb, we'll never, grow up to be anything, that also will happen because our energy will go where we put our attention, or you could even say our attention flows where our energy goes. It works both ways. So from the cradle, you were destined to be a great salesperson.
Apparently so. Yeah,
That's
apparently so.
cool.
But I
That's
do love
cool.
that you speak to and this is something that, we can take this wherever we want, but I love that you speak to the neuroscience behind success, because even as someone who I think was a good salesperson for many years, I still kept bumping up against so many blocks, so many limitations, a lot of inner struggle as well, even though on the outside I looked like I was doing well. And for me, it wasn't until I started learning how to reprogram and rewire the subconscious mind and start to see myself as the person who had the results I wanted, that success became so much more effortless. Not that there's not work involved, but it was a totally different dynamic and shift when I started learning the neuroscience behind success. So love that
Okay.
you bring that up. I think it's critical.
So Elyse, spill the beans. Spill the beans, because sales is so much about mindset. It's about how we present ourselves. It's about what we believe. So what was that shift that you made that ended up being from a neuroscience perspective? But how did that play out? What was the behavior change? What was the belief change that then changed your behavior?
Sure. So I firmly believe that our level of income will never exceed our level of self-worth. And so
Could you say that again for the listeners? Because that is gold.
Yeah. Yeah. Our level of income will never exceed our level of self-worth. So
that's great. That's so great.
Oh, it's and so my own experience, and I can share the backstory, but my own experience was I was stuck at the same level for 10 years and then was able to quantum leap and 10x my income in 6 weeks. And people say, what was the strategy you used? What was the technique you used? It wasn't
really
a strategy.
6 weeks? Really 6 weeks?
6. Yeah. And I can explain more.
You have to, because I'm being a doubting Thomas here. Not that I think you would lie, but
yeah, no, I know it happened so fast. It didn't make sense to me either. So it really was one of those experiences, kind of like if you, Bob Proctor, right? And he talks about some of his quantum leap experiences.
Just passed away. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Great mentor. Didn't know him personally, but I learned so much from him. And he talks about his experience in quantum leaps. And I can relate, because it felt like it happened that fast in my life too. Once I learned what we can talk about in terms of the neuroscience and shifting self-image and self-worth. So
this was really, Bob Proctor was teaching really before neuroscience was a thing. I mean, it existed, it was real, but people weren't talking about it.
Exactly. I like to think now, when I look at like my own quantum leap in sales and in life, it's kind of a combination of what Bob Proctor talked about, what Joe Dispenza talks about. And so you've got both like the science and the spiritual aspect that I can see coming into play.
Joe Dispenza, he's science too, because he talks about energy.
Oh, to me, he's very science. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because I'm not woo-woo at all, and I follow him.
Yeah, no, I love the science behind this, and just learning the why behind the quantum leap. Because once we learn what we're doing and how to do it, you can really create any type of result you want in your life. So kind of going back to before the quantum leap happened, I went into sales in my early 20s and quickly found myself living a life and a career that I thought was what was going to make me happy. So this will date me. The first thing I sold out of college was the Yellow Pages, which many of your listeners probably either don't know or they're embarrassed to admit that they do know. But
I know. I'll admit it.
And it was actually good money. I mean, it was
you had a Rolodex too, I bet.
I did. Yeah, I know this just totally dates me. So this was, I went into corporate sales like right when the internet was starting to really be more of a thing.
What were you selling? What were you selling?
So it was
ads in the Yellow Pages.
Exactly. Yeah. So I worked for AT&T, and at the time the Yellow Pages was still this was 2008. So the internet was starting
right before everything crashed.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Right. So you want to talk about resilience, like selling Yellow Pages when it's like it's still a thing, but it's starting to decline. People are pulling money out. There's the crash. Small businesses are going down, which
it's actually similar. It's actually similar, I think, to what's going on now with streaming and main TV, right? Like people 100%. Are pulling the money out, right? Okay. Yeah. So, okay. Exactly. How'd you do that? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Well, it was interesting because I came in and there were a lot of sales reps who had been there for years, and they were considered legacy reps, and they were used to just walking in and having a customer sign off on a purchase order, and they made their big commission check, and people were just every year signing for the same types of ads, in the yellow pages. But it wasn't the case when I came in, and people were questioning every dollar. They were saying, no, we're going to pull out, or we need to reinvest over in digital. So we had a digital arm that I actually loved selling way more than print, but still it was 2008. So people were reducing spend. So I think coming back to that persistence and that determination, it was great because it taught resilience. I didn't come in and have a layup sale. I had to get really good at selling in order to be successful.
So how did you do that? And how did you do that with, it's a dying industry, as an understatement. And then you have the hot dogs who've been there forever. Yeah. And now the pie is shrinking. And then come this pretty little blonde. How did you do that?
Yeah. Well, I look back on it and there's a lot that I learned along the way because I worked very, very hard. And this is actually a lot of what inspired me to create our brand for women, which is called She Sells, because I went into complete exhaustion, burnout, overwhelm. I'd get up. I was in very much like masculine energy all the time. So get up at 2:00 in the morning. I was like, if I can just outwork everybody, then I'll be successful. And so I did. And I did that
and
for
you
years. And I was, And I found myself kind of coming back to what I said before. I found myself in my mid-20s, top of the leaderboard at work, doing well, nice house, nice car. But inside, what I wasn't telling anyone was that I was struggling with crippling anxiety. I was making money, but I had a lot of fear of it leaving, which I later learned it wasn't actually about the money at all. So that was a really interesting.
I do a whole thing about money and our emotional connection to money. I created like 4 avatars. So you were William the Warrior, which is no matter how successful, how much money you had, like the second you buy that house, you're going to lose your job the next day.
Yeah.
Because there's an anxiety that's fleeting and it's not real.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, I want to learn about your avatars because that's exactly it. So in a lot of fear and anxiety, especially about money, I was in a really unhealthy marriage. I had an eating disorder, panic attacks. I mean, you name it. So classic.
You're a basket case.
Basket case. Yeah. Diagnosed me as a basket case. Right? So classic case of everything on the outside looking good and on the inside struggling. And the other piece that ties into sales is the way that we were taught to sell and the way I thought I had to sell to be successful didn't feel aligned with what I knew in my heart was right, didn't feel aligned with how I wanted to treat other people. It was typical slimy sales stuff, right? So
give it a specific example of a technique that you were taught that was totally misaligned with who you were, that was really killing you.
Sure. And I'm like, I can call up any. Well, here's what I'll say. The mindset behind what was taught was do anything you need to do for the sale.
Close the deal.
Close the deal, no matter what. It wasn't about, and this is multiple companies I worked for. So this is not, throwing shade at any particular company. This is just the way sales has typically been taught.
People forgot that you mentioned AT&T. Oops, I just brought it up. Okay.
I know, as I'm saying, it should be my fault. And there was a lot of good that was taught too, but there were also in many organizations I've been a part of, it's get the sale at any cost.
It was the playbook. It was the standard playbook at the time.
Exactly. And frankly, it still is in a lot of organizations. Sure. It still is. And so a lot of the women who come into our community now and the men who come into our community, they are seeking a different way because there's still so many things being taught that just don't feel right from a human to human level. And we don't have to play out of that playbook to succeed. So that's why I'm really passionate about this. And I think trying to do that was a lot of what contributed to the mental, emotional, and physical stress that I found myself under in that scenario.
Okay. Well, whenever we're out of alignment, that's exactly what happens. But go back to, I distracted you from the conversation with the influence of Bob Proctor and Dr. Joe and how that created that mindset shift. Like I heard what you just said. You were selling in a way where you weren't true to yourself, right? So I consider that selling your soul to the devil. Like just get the deal done, close it. And even if you don't feel good about it, your bank account's going up. So what could possibly go wrong? So how did those two really industry thought leaders influence you?
Yeah. So the other thing, I'll give just a tiny bit more backstory and then I'll talk about how that their influence. So the other thing that was happening and that continued to happen beyond that time was, even though I was in sales and then I left corporate to go out and start my own company and start coaching, had unlimited earnings potential, I always made the same amount of money every year, no matter what I did. I always made low six figures, and I've worked very, very hard. And I felt very, very stuck at the same time. And
you couldn't break through.
Exactly. And what I didn't realize was that I had a financial set point, like we all do, which was I was programmed to make a certain amount of money. And so no matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, my identity was that of a six-figure earner. So I always did that, and I always made that. And so fast forward many years, I'm running my own coaching company, entrepreneur, got remarried, love of my life. We've got a young baby. And I had been, he's 3 years old now, but he was maybe 3 months old at the time things started to really change. And
motherhood does do that to people, especially to women, parenthood, but because behaviors that we would, I'll say, hide behind, we can no longer hide behind. Like a very quiet, unassertive woman becomes a mother, and all of a sudden we become a mama bear. And like, you'd never yell at somebody like, don't do that, but they're messing with your kid. Don't do that.
Oh yeah, exactly.
So it's not unusual, at least this has been my experience, that the mindset shift occurs when we become mothers, because it taps into potential we didn't know we had as a person.
Yeah. Oh, I love your way of putting that, because that's exactly what it did. Yeah, that's exactly what it did. And I think around the time I had my coaching business, was still making the same amount, doing well. But I was reading Bronnie Ware's Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And I remember I was in my son's nursery one night and reading it. And one of the regrets that stood out to me so much was the regret about, I'm going to paraphrase, but I wish I had lived a life that was true to me instead of what other people expected of me. And there was something about that where it just struck me differently. And I realized how much of my life and my vision and my goals and the bigness of my life that I was craving, I call it now putting your life on layaway. And it was I had a much bigger vision for my life, to be involved philanthropically, to speak on the world stage, to be a bigger thought leader, to be able to retire my husband from his respiratory therapy job so he could study to pursue his passion of going to medical school.
Which, by the way, we were speaking about before we went on air, and her husband starting medical school like in 3 minutes. So congratulations.
Literally just happened. Yeah. It's kind of fun to have this conversation now, because even just a few years ago, these things they felt so far off, and they felt like something that somebody else would do, but not me. And so I just realized in that moment that nobody was coming to give me permission to play full out in my business and in my life the way that I actually wanted to. And I didn't know, I also had some loss of friends at early ages around that time. And I just kind of woke up and said, I don't know how much longer I'm going to have. So why am I waiting to give myself permission to go for the
playing so small?
So small. Exactly. And so I just made that commitment and that decision in that moment that whatever it takes, whatever it looks like, I'm done playing small. I'm done giving my power away. And I don't know if you've ever had an experience.
Which, by the way, nobody can take it from you unless you give it to them.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And I got this pen. You can't take it from me unless I give it to you.
Yeah.
Same thing with our power.
Yeah. That's so true. And I had unconsciously given my power away in so many ways throughout my life.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think many of us do.
Yeah.
And it was just this moment of kind of reckoning of like, no, I'm going to do what it takes to play full out and see how big, how expansive I can make my life, my business, et cetera.
And how old was your son at the time?
So he was our only at the time. He was about 3 months old. He's 3 years old now. We've got a 5-month-old now as well. So
wow, congratulations. I don't think that's a coincidence though, because you wanted a bigger world for him.
Yes. Yeah. You'll do whatever it takes for your kids. It's so
Mama
true.
bear.
That's exactly it. It'll pull some power out of you that you didn't know you had.
Exactly.
Yeah. you know how it goes. You ask and the universe delivers. And I think it was like the next day or so, I was listening to a podcast from a woman who mentors moms to become millionaires. And I wasn't I wasn't an active listener of this show, but I was listening, and she happens to mention that she's got a spot for a private coaching client. And I knew that one of the things I wanted to do was scale my business to 7 figures and have more financial opportunity to be able to live the life we wanted to live. And I'm kind of laughing. I'm like, all right, universe, I'll bite. So I get on the discovery call. We talk about her private coaching. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. This makes perfect sense. I want to do it. And then she says that the investment to work with her is $50,000 for 6 months. Now, even now, that to me, it's like, okay, that's a significant investment. But for the version of me who'd made 100 the whole year before and was the breadwinner of our family and hadn't saved that money for coaching, I was like, how in the world am I going to do this? But it was one of those moments where, you know, when your intuition is just so strong and it totally defies logic, but my intuition was so strong, you need to find a way to do this and move forward on this. And this is something else that I have firmly come to believe is your must will move mountains. So there were so many excuses I wanted to make in that moment of, I don't have the money. This is crazy. This doesn't make sense. But it was a must for me to follow the nudges. I'd made the commitment. So now I was going to follow the nudges and see where I was guided to go to be able to live that big, full life that I wanted to live. And so
the transformation made it worth it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so found a way to put the deposit on a credit card, was in total fear that I just put my family in financial ruin, there's no guarantee that anything was going to work out. But part of why I did it, Dr. Patty Ann, and part of what I knew was going to happen was I was going to have to come face to face with every limiting belief about myself, about my worth, about money, and about who I was. And I was going to have to face them head on in order to just be the woman who could show up to pay for this coaching and to be successful in this. And so that was where I think we attract the resources we need to be successful in the challenge. And so that was where suddenly it was like I'd kind of loosely followed Bob Proctor. I'd loosely followed Joe Dispenza up until that point, but I started doing a deep dive into what they taught. And I suspended disbelief and I said, well, let me be open-minded that I could rewire my mind for abundance. Let me be open-minded that I could reprogram my identity to be that of a 7-figure earner. Let me just be open-minded because I had no other choice. And the clock is ticking and I got to figure out how I'm going to be successful in this. And it was a period of 6 weeks from when I made that commitment and made that decision and put the deposit on a credit card to say, yes, I am worthy of this. Yes, I'm going to do this. Yes, I can. It was about 3 weeks of pure hell, limiting beliefs, fear. What have I done?
Through the coaching or with yourself?
Both. I would say both. So it was, I'd begun the coaching at that point. But I was still facing it was like everything that could kind of exist under the surface had been brought up and I had to deal with it. Yeah. Cause I didn't have a choice. So it was a very intense time, but 6 weeks from the time at which I made that commitment, she had me launch a new group program. I was showing up differently. She had me sing publicly on social media. I had been a singer earlier on in my life, and I stopped singing after I'd been sexually assaulted, and I'd kind of like shrunk back in so many ways from who I was. And she challenged me in ways that the old me wouldn't have been comfortable showing up. So I got so out of my comfort zone, started to see myself as worthy of more, did inner child work. I mean, you name it, I did it. And in 6 weeks, turned annual income into monthly income. But again, people say like, well, what was the tactic? What was the technique? It was an identity shift. I became a different person in that process. And so those things have become the foundation of what we teach our clients in our community now, because you can have the best sales tactic in the world, but if you're layering it on top of a financial programming that you're set to make $50,000, or you're never going to be successful, or it's not safe to be visible, or money is the root of all evil. It doesn't matter what technique you use. If you're layering it on top of that, of a foundation that's not solid, it's not going to be successful. So go wherever you want to go from there. But that was,
I'm laughing when you said money is the root of all evil, because my second book teaches women to negotiate. It's called Money Can Buy You Happiness. Secrets Women Need to Know to Get Paid What They're Worth. And a lot of it is we have been programmed, and women bought it hook, line, and sinker, men not so much. On money is the root of all evil, you know? And I got some hate mail from somebody saying, you're a clinical psychologist and you're saying money can buy you happiness. You know nothing about happiness. I said, well, the only people that say that it can are the ones that have it, so they don't really know what they're talking about. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I think what would be really helpful to the listeners is what was one limiting belief that you didn't identify as a limiting belief? So you had to shift it by first acknowledging that it was.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the biggest things for me, and I see this for the members of our community too, came down to worthiness. And I didn't know I was really programmed.
Get paid what you're worth.
At a high, exactly. Yeah. I was programmed for a high level of unworthiness. So even when even when I was back in corporate, the going from being at the top of the leaderboard, it was all about validation because I didn't feel good enough. That was the only and so that's why from that point there was never enough money, because I was always seeking that validation from outside.
Well, there'd never be enough because you told yourself that.
Yeah.
It was your own truth.
Yeah, that's also true. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that was a very big thing. And when I would think about what I wanted, I had this distance and gap and separation emotionally. And there was even this feeling of unworthiness. And so that's part of where Dr. Joe's work came in and was so powerful for me, was learning to practice feelings of worthiness, because there was so much conditioning growing up, again, just that I wasn't worthy. And we get this from all angles, right? Whether it's religious, whether it's societal, whether it's parental, you get it from all different angles. So that was something I really had to consciously work on. And I still notice places in my life where it shows up. I'm like, man, that's that old story again. Okay, I got it. Like, I'm the only one who can decide that I'm worthy or not worthy of this. So just like I wouldn't tell my kids they're not worthy of something, I'm going to tell myself that I'm worthy of what I want as well.
Right. So do you think that not worthy shows up in the form of doubt?
It's an interesting question. I've never
Doubting
thought about
yourself.
it that way. About the time. I'm sure they're related. Yeah, I could absolutely see a correlation there. I think it's all probably tied together at some level.
Yeah. Because, I doubt that will happen, or I doubt that could ever be me. To me, that's, if you can't see yourself with that being you, it ain't going to be, you're right. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. And something else that I believe is that your desires are green lights. So we all have, what's so interesting, and I use this analogy too, is like how much we doubt our own desires. So that pivotal moment that changed so much of my life, I really tuned into, what do I desire? And it was some very specific things. It was things like being able to retire my husband so he could study, and creating a different lifestyle for our family, and launching this is something I haven't done yet, but I will, like launching a magazine for female entrepreneurs, building a bigger, like doing things in the media.
Why is that? What's that about? Why would you want to do that?
So I love highlighting other people, putting them in the spotlight, helping them see how incredible they are. This is something from an early age. I have a younger sister, and when she was, gosh, I don't know, maybe 6, 7, 8, I started.
How many years younger than you?
2 years.
You said younger.
So, okay. Yeah, two years.
Not that much.
Yeah. And I was always a makeup girl, so I would do makeovers on her, and then I would take her. We'd do like photo shoots in the backyard. And I loved the glamour. I loved the beauty of it. But I would do photo shoots of her, and then later on, I actually went to school for journalism and helped lead a magazine there at my college campus. And I loved getting.
Okay, so where'd you go to school? I have to ask where you went to school.
UNC. Chapel Hill.
UNC. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. North Carolina girl originally.
Okay.
So,
and Tobacco Road? Road?
Yeah,
there you go.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah. One between Duke and UNC.
Yeah.
Never the twain shall meet. Got it.
Exactly. Yeah. The Tobacco Trail. It's beautiful.
Follow basketball. Yeah.
So beautiful. Yeah, exactly. I'm probably the only Chapel Hill student who never went to a basketball game, which is, I know, terrible.
We need to talk. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know. But it ties back to I worked. Like my parents paid for school, but I wanted to
in your
work.
interest.
It wasn't my interest at all. So I was always interested in other things, and I loved putting people in the spotlight. I love helping them like see an interview about
Hang on. I
themselves.
got to go here. I got to go here. Well, was that symbolic of, I heard the reasons you gave, right? But we can rationalize anything. Was that symbolic of you always being a fish that would swim upstream?
Probably so. Probably so.
So how else has that shown up in your life that's contributed to your success?
The fish swimming upstream.
Going against the tide.
Yeah, for sure. I've always felt like a bit of a contrarian. It's interesting you could pick up on that. Yeah, I guess maybe it's more obvious than I think. Yeah, No,
I'd like to think I'm just a genius, but go ahead.
I mean, but honestly, I do a lot of interviews and I've never been asked that question. So yeah. I think it's contributed to my strong desire to change a lot in the industry and change a lot of what I see around me in the business world and the sales world and culture.
So the status quo doesn't speak to you. The status quo is an opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So I really desire with the work that we do to help bring a lot of the business and sales world out of I just consider it out of the darkness into the light and help people see that. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's so interesting because when you just said earlier about wanting to start a magazine for female entrepreneurs, I was thinking of some of the ones that I've been interviewed for, blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking, why the hell does she want to do that? It's a dying industry. But now it makes sense. You just explained it.
Yeah.
The contrarian.
Yeah, it'll be a digital magazine, most likely, at least to start. But yeah, I
I was thinking like, old school.
Well, it could be. I'm totally open for that. I mean, I think, we'll see where it goes, but just a publication that highlights incredible women doing amazing things. And I've always had that media background as well, which I love. So going back to your desires are green lights and the self-doubt piece, I think what's so interesting is how much we doubt our desires. There is not a bone in my body that has a desire to be a female basketball player like that. Like there's nothing about the WNBA that speaks to me. And if you meet me in person, I'm 5'3", like it's just, it wouldn't happen. But there's
towering over me. I'm 5'1".
Oh my gosh. Okay. There you go. My soul sister. So you understand. Smart women, they got to stick together. But
small women.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But so there's no desire in my body to do that. But there are desires to do all these other things. And for anyone listening, like the things that you desire, the things that speak to your soul, the only reason you want to do something and that something speaks to you is that you can actually do it and you can do it in this lifetime and you were meant to go in that direction. And so I think we waste so much energy, and I've certainly done this in my life, doubting, well, can I do it? Am I good enough? Blah, blah, blah. And I think if we can just decide your desire is a green light, whatever is speaking to you, you need to go in that direction and trust in the direction you're pulled. It's going to lead to something good for you, for other people as well. And when we just decide that we are also worthy of what we desire, you wouldn't have a desire that you weren't worthy of achieving. We can stop wasting that energy that's tied to doubting and instead put it into something productive, which is actually taking action towards the direction of our dreams. So I saw that in that kind of pivotal moment in my son's nursery when I decided to make a change and decided to go for my desires. There were so many people who were blessed along the way that I couldn't have anticipated, that if I hadn't gone for it, their lives wouldn't have been impacted as well. And same with you and what you've gone after in your life, and same for everyone listening. We can all think about that. So learning to feel worthy of what you want. And I think it's a practicing of a feeling of worthiness as well. That's part of the rewiring of the subconscious, is learning to speak in that emotional language, which is so important. It opens us up, especially as women, to be able to trust ourselves and trust in the pursuit of those desires. And life gets really interesting and exciting when we do that.
Okay. So I'm going to throw a monkey wrench here. Ready?
Yeah.
So you've coached a lot of women, a lot of people, right? To tremendous success. And I can see you're being humble, but there's no doubt tremendous success. And I've had this experience too, but I want to know how do you help differentiate people from their desire and their absolutely unrealistic expectations. For example, I'm 5'1". If I said to you, back in the day, I want to grow up and play in the WNBA, that's not happening.
Yeah.
It's just not. I'm not Stephen Curry. At least he's what, 5'6", 5'7"? So when you must hear people have unrealistic expectations and desires, what do you do? How do you do that without killing their soul?
Sure. So, I mean, we have to work along the lines of nature, right? So we have to work along the natural laws, and there are natural laws like gravity. Like if someone says, I'm going to fly and I'm going to jump off this building, like there are things we have to work within. There's height.
Well, psychotic.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the key is getting to what is the true core soul desire. So I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of things that I sought after in my life that I wasn't conscious to were actually just about validation and about me not feeling good enough. And so from that place, I would seek after a certain amount of money, thinking when I get there, then I'll feel good enough. But it wasn't the true core soul desire. That was actually coming from a place of insecurity, a place from not enoughness. So one of the most powerful questions I think we can ask is, if no one were watching, if no one were looking, if I wasn't concerned about what anybody else thought, what do I really want? And that helps us kind of cut through the noise and cut through the things that we think we need to do to be safe, accepted, secure, etc., to distill what is the true essence of what I really want. Because from that place, I did this exercise for myself the other day, and it was really interesting. Just you get such laser clarity on what are the things that you're really meant to bring forth in your life right now when we stop comparing, when we stop judging, and we start tuning into true soul desire. And from that place, it can be things more like things that are aligned with what you really want. I want to launch this charity. I want to, like, one of my soul desires recently, because we moved so much for a little bit for our family, was like, I want a steady home for my boys to grow up in. And so just, closed on the house a few minutes before this interview. And it was like, that was a soul desire. It's different. So it's this concept that I call selling from wholeness. We could also probably say like goal setting from wholeness, which is realizing that you're whole and complete already as you are. And so from that place, what do I want to bring forth? What do I want to experience? What is my soul meant to create on this earth? And it's a very grounded place of goal setting. And it can be very expansive. I'm into quantum leaps. I'm into thinking really big. I think we limit ourselves way too much in terms of what's possible. But it's a difference in energy when you're connecting with the goal. One, I think, is like lack and separation. And the other is more of a expansive feeling of like, I can't wait to create this. I'm already good. I'm already whole. And from that place, let me see what I can bring forth into the world to create this new experience for myself and for others. Does that make sense? The difference?
It makes perfect sense. I mean, it does. And, when we're in a place of expansion, you can feel it. Anything's possible. Everything's an opportunity. And that's when your genius can come to fruition, truly. And when you're in a state of constriction, everything is a problem. Everything is an issue. Nothing can happen. And I tell clients, when you are in a state of constriction or contraction, whatever you want to call it, do not try to work on your new anything, because it will contaminate that energy. And when you're in a state of expansion, keep going. Just keep going, because otherwise we can't get out of our own way.
It's so true. It's so true, because you can only think to the level of your emotional state too, right? So learning to tap into that, am I in constriction? Am I in expansion? You're not going to have your earth-shattering, business-changing ideas from that place of constriction. So I appreciate your take on that, because I think so often we're taught to just bulldoze our emotions and not pay attention to them, but they're critical.
Well, when we know that emotions are repressed, denied, avoided, get amplified. Everybody knows that. So when you have an emotion, they're just emotions, right? They're energy in motion. That's an emotion. It's energy in motion. It's physics. And when you are in constriction, it's bottled up, if you will, and everything is harder and there's nothing creative going on. But when you're in expansion, you're open. It's really physics. The NACE, because I'm not a woo-woo person at all. But, when you're like in flow, right? Athletes, and when you're at your peak and you're doing, like, time just gets suspended. You could be doing something for hours and you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to eat all day. Now that's never happened to me, but I hear people can forget to eat all day. Because the energy is feeding on itself. It's real, but when you're doing something that's not true to who you are, it's a slog. That's the way I look at it. And that's why it's a whole different conversation, but I think that's, stress and food, I think, is the root of all illness. Because when we're denying who we are, but when you have an emotion, it's just neutral. Fear, anger, just accept it, embrace it. Because when you don't, it controls you. But if you embrace it, then it dissipates. And I've done exercises like that with my clients. It's unbelievable. And it's hard for them. I don't want to do this anymore. What are you doing to me? But when you sit through it and then it opens up, it unwinds your nervous system. That's why we tell people stop watching mainstream media. It plays on our fears. It gets us revved up. Whoever you're listening to, that's the point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in business, you lose out. You won't see the opportunities right in front of you if you're restricted. And I imagine that's what you're helping people do a lot of. Like, how are you putting your clients into expansion? Because I know you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love this conversation because most of my life I lived with low grade anxiety and fear, and I just didn't even know that there was anything different. So when I learned,
so you do know, like, fear, anxiety, fear, and excitement on a functional MRI look exactly the same. It's just what we label it.
Interesting.
It's just what we label it. So if you label that emotion fear or anxiety, but if you label it excitement.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
But anyway, go ahead.
Sure. It's all perception, right? It makes total sense. It's all perception. So one of the biggest things that created huge shifts in my business was learning to practice those higher level emotions that I actually wasn't used to. So learning to get into a state of profound gratitude, even though nothing had happened differently on the outside yet. Learning to get into a state of worthiness, learning to expand my body and the energy field around it. And so it's a game changer. And so when I'm working with clients now, we do a lot of emotional work and we do a lot of looking at, who did the original work on beautiful states versus suffering states? Why am I blanking on his name? Is it David Baer? I don't know it. So I don't know. I
can't help you up there.
Yeah. But
another thing I should know, but I don't.
there's so many great minds in this space. So either way, learning to get reacquainted with emotions, because a lot of, I find the women who come into our community, especially, they've disconnected from their body, whether that's from sexual trauma, whether that's from whatever sort of trauma. And so they're not in tune with their emotional state. And so they don't know really how to identify what they're actually feeling. But once we can learn to connect with
they don't know they don't know what they want. It goes back to earlier.
Yeah.
When you're working with people, like, what do you want? They don't know.
Yeah. They think, oh, it's a pile of money. It'll make my problems go away, or it's this or that. But again, it's getting back to, I think we have to be able to distill that core soul desire. And to be able to do that, we've got to learn how to navigate through the muck that we've accumulated over the years of limiting beliefs and emotions. And so
sometimes we have to find it.
Yeah.
Because we have to help them find the soul again.
Yeah, exactly. So we do a lot of work tying, okay, what's the emotional state that I'm feeling right now? And what's the thought that triggered that? So that's, quick indicator of a limiting belief is when you're feeling a negative emotion. What was I just thinking about this scenario? So we do a lot of work like that to start to identify what the persistent recurring limiting beliefs are. Yeah. And then switching to finding, well, what's a belief or a story that would actually empower what you want? And then they'll notice usually when they say that, even just a slight shift in their body and their energy and their emotion. And the way I always look at it, and I'm sure you probably, deeper in the psychology of this than I do, but as I say things to myself and my body feels better, that's my indicator of truth. I'm following
Of
what's the more
course.
positive emotion. That's my indicator of truth. So,
Well, because your body doesn't lie. But when you change the story, you change your emotion.
mhm.
It can't not happen
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's what we're telling ourselves.
Yeah.
Because our
Exactly.
brain believes it to bring it full circle.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
What's share with us the brag about the biggest transformation you coached a client to?
Oh my gosh. Well, there's a couple of women who come to mind that and some men, but I'll brag on one woman who actually has become a member of our team because her life transformed so much. And there's some things that are personal that I probably won't share just for
Of course.
for her privacy. But she came into our community, oh gosh, 2.5 years ago, like really when we were just starting the brand pretty early on, and was in corporate banking, doing well again, kind of like I was like doing well on the outside, had a side hustle doing network marketing. And she came in like just looking for better sales approach for her network marketing business. And what she didn't realize, and this is why a lot of people come to us initially, is for sales and business coaching. I consider that like the Trojan horse that brings people in. And then from there, I'm able to get in and do the deep inner work. Well, she came into first my 10K club group program, and then she elevated into my mastermind after that for women going for 7 figures. But in 6 months, she actually doubled her income. So she was again in corporate. She was wanting more flow. She was wanting to go for higher level opportunities, but she was holding back so much out of fear, out of feeling like not enough. In lack mindset. And then when she learned to do the inner work, she actually had 3 like dream opportunities show up within 6 months that all were much greater income, much greater opportunity. And she calls it like, I had my pick on a platter of what I wanted to do from there. Not only that though, it's transformed her personal relationship. Her husband is showing up differently. She's contributing to a book that we're co-authoring this year as well. And the transformation has been so great in her life that she's actually come alongside in our team and is working to help members of our community now as well. We've had entrepreneurs, it's 100x their income, I think would be the right number when I'm thinking about what they've done. Go on to literally, we've collectively helped save the life of a little boy over in India by donating money to very expensive medical treatment that his parents couldn't pay for. So it's been really beautiful. And there's not one story there's so many stories of people transforming their lives. But I think it comes down to your level of income will never exceed your level of self-worth. So it starts with them shifting how they see themselves, how worthy they feel. And then from that place, they have totally different outcomes.
Right. Just all in a day's work. So it's hard to pick one.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, I could talk to you all day. Jim, just ask a couple more questions before we wrap up. What's the one song you can't live without?
Oh, okay. So this is my walkout song on stage right now, and I love it.
Okay.
Tony Jones, Take Up Spaces. If you're not familiar with Tony, she does affirmation music. She is wonderful.
Okay.
She actually came and performed. We did a retreat in Sedona a couple months back, and she came and performed live for the women there. And she's wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then what's the last book you reread and why?
The last book I reread. Oh my gosh, there's been a couple this year. The last one I reread, Becoming the One by Kathleen Cameron. She's a phenomenal coach in the manifestation mindset space, and her story, I share many similarities to her story, but I love her level of ownership of taking up a lot of space, and she quantum leaped her life and her income tremendously in a kind of similar time frame. And I love how unapologetic she is about going for what she wants and living big. So it's a powerful book. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So unabashedly brag on yourself. Tell people how they can learn more about you, how they can find out about you, where you want them to go.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Well, I so appreciate this. So I think the average podcast listener has like 7 favorite podcasts in their queue. So if you enjoyed this and you want to come come listen to our podcast, She Sells Radio, along with Dr. Patty Ann's podcast as well. We're going to have Dr. Patty Ann on this show, so we'll have you on as well. I can't wait. It's going to be such
I'm really
a good
excited.
Conversation. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great place to connect. And then ElyseArcher.com is the home of all things where you can go get connected. We've got a lot of free resources.
ELYSE Archer, ARCHER.com for the people listening.
Exactly.
Want to make sure they can find you easily.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you. And we just launched, we're kind of like, I guess, a bit late in the game here, but we just launched a new community. It's a free online community. We're on Facebook, the She Sells online community. So people can come.
Never too late.
Yeah. I think, look, it's the perfect timing. So we've got a lot of good free resources in there. There's great networking with other women in sales and female entrepreneurs as well, so that you can come get connected with us there too.
Great. And I just want to add, even if you're not in sales, Elyse is for you, because everything is still about you and being able to own and sell yourself. So don't disqualify yourself if you're not in sales, right?
Yeah, complete. It's really life transformation that we're after here. Like I said, sales is kind of the Trojan horse, but it's true life transformation. So thank you for that.